Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a totally counterintuitive workplace phenomenon about leadership, motivation, and, well, burnout. We all know the classic stories of hard-driving, private sector bosses. Think of your typical Steve Jobs figure, who are famous for just wearing out their employees in the pursuit of corporate dominance. But what happens when the mission isn't profit, but the public good? What happens when you work for an absolute saint?
Okay, let's dive right in by asking a question that kind of challenges everything we think we know about great managers. Can a boss actually be too dedicated to doing good? I mean, we naturally assume that having a completely selfless leader is the ultimate workplace jackpot, right? But recent academic research from field studies out in Thailand suggests we might need to totally rethink that. To understand this paradox, we first need to define a core academic concept called public service motivation, or PSM for short. Now, this isn't just about showing up, clocking in, and clocking out. It's a deeply held belief system. Individuals with high PSM genuinely believe their personal interests are way less important than the public's. They believe standing up for the rights of others is absolutely necessary, even if it requires some serious personal sacrifice.
All right, Section 1. The perfect leader myth.
We all assume a selfless public-serving leader must be the absolute dream, right? If they're sacrificing their own time to help the needy, they've got to be inspiring to work for. Researchers actually tested this assumption using experimental vignettes. They asked employees to imagine working for a hypothetical district chief named Mr. Wanchai. In the high PSM scenario, Mr. Wanchai represents the ultimate dedicated leader. As you can see from the quote, he works day and night. Public service takes precedence over literally everything, including his own personal matters. He even spends his own money to help the needy. He is the ultimate public servant.
Now, if you had to choose between these two extremes, a low PSM boss who just hides in their office for personal gain versus a high PSM boss like Mr. Wanchai who sacrifices his personal time and money for the greater good, the choice seems blindingly obvious. You'd pick the hero. The low PSM boss is what researchers call a hindrance demand. They literally block you from doing meaningful work. But as we're about to see, the hero boss brings a completely different set of problems.
Which brings us to Section 2. Too much of a good thing.
This introduces a fascinating concept in organizational psychology, the too much of a good thing effect. Basically, an extreme level of something positive can actually have major unintended negative consequences once it crosses a certain threshold. And the academic data reveals a hidden dark side to extreme virtue. Take a look at this distinct U-shaped curve. On the vertical axis, we've got the emotional exhaustion of the employee, and on the horizontal, the leader's level of public service motivation. Look at the edges. Emotional exhaustion spikes predictably when you have a low PSM leader. But look at the far right. It spikes again when you have a highly dedicated high PSM leader. The burnout levels are almost identical at both extremes. Wild, right?
So why on earth does the hero boss cause so much burnout? Well, think of them like that one intensely fit friend who constantly makes you feel guilty just for wanting to relax on a Saturday. A boss who cares too much sets an impossibly high baseline. The data shows this creates what psychologists call challenge job demands. When your boss is working 80-hour weeks and spending their own money, it creates massive role overload. You constantly fear you're going to fall short of their saintly expectations. And worse, the boss is so relentlessly focused on saving the world that they completely neglect the basic, everyday needs of their own team, which creates this immense, unspoken pressure on you to self-sacrifice as well.
Let's move to Section 3, the person-supervisor fit. So what exactly is the psychological mechanism driving all this exhaustion? It all comes down to a measure of value congruence. Basically, how well your working style aligns with your boss's. Notice how this curve flips upside down compared to the last one we looked at. Here, the highest point of fit with your supervisor is right smack in the middle. At the extremes, whether your boss is entirely selfish or entirely selfless, your perceived fit drops off a cliff. An overly dedicated boss makes everyday employees feel like their fundamental values simply do not align.
It really boils down to this. Extreme virtue signals, incompatibility. It's kind of like trying to force two mismatched puzzle pieces together. When a leader pushes their commitment way beyond reasonable boundaries, it acts as a glaring signal to the average employee. It silently communicates that unless you're also willing to abandon your weekends, your hobbies, and your family time for the mission, you don't truly fit in here. And that mismatch, it's deeply stressful. And prolonged stress leads directly to the emotional exhaustion we just talked about.
Next up, Section 4. Your motivation matters.
But wait, there's a really fascinating plot twist in the data. It's not just about your boss's personality. It's also about you, the employee, and your own level of internal drive. Check out how this interaction plot splits employees into two distinct groups. The dotted line represents employees with lower public service motivation, while the solid line represents those with high PSM. Look at the significant gap between those two lines on the right side of the chart, right under the high PSM leaders section. The solid line stays noticeably higher. This actually proves that highly motivated employees tolerate these intense workaholic bosses significantly better than average employees do.
This happens because of what researchers call the similarity attraction perspective. If you're an average employee who just wants to do a good job, clock out, and go home, the extreme boss crushes you with completely impossible demands. But if you're also a highly driven public servant, a high PSM employee, you don't see a tyrant at all. You see a role model. You view the boss's extreme dedication as a shared mission and a thrilling opportunity to act on your own deeply held values.
Which brings us to our final section, the Goldilocks leadership zone. Because most organizations are made up of average, balanced people, we have to find a Goldilocks middle ground. You know, not too cold, not too hot, but just right. In the study, the absolute lowest levels of employee burnout and the highest levels of supervisor fit were actually recorded under the moderate PSM version of Mr. Wanchai. Look at this description. He spends a lot of time helping the needy, but he also makes sure to make time for his personal matters. He's the boss who works incredibly hard, but also conspicuously clocks out to live a normal human life. So, the crucial takeaway here is that effective leadership requires a really delicate balance. To prevent unintentional team burnout, leaders absolutely need to follow these 3 steps. First, avoid extreme self-sacrifice. It just sets a toxic baseline for the rest of the team. Second, actively balance the organization's noble goals with the actual well-being of the staff. And third, recognize that everyday employees have healthy limits, and that isn't a flaw. It's completely normal. Take a moment to reflect on your own workplace environment. Are you celebrating leaders who work 80 hours a week for the mission? Are the virtues being praised in your office actually the very things driving your team's exhaustion? It turns out, even when the goal is literally saving the world, boundaries still matter. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll leave you to think about this. How much of a good thing is too much in your own career?